Welcome to the Art and Innovation Podcast. I'm Herschel Shapiro. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Engineezy, a creator focused on engineered art. His kinetic sculptures are nothing short of incredible. So, let's get started. Hi, Engineezy. How's it going?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing good. Your YouTube channel, your whole social media, is blowing up. The latest shorts on your YouTube has like 6 million views in 4 days. What do you think is the reason for that level of intense success?
I've been thinking about this a lot actually because about a month ago I posted a series of shorts about a bubble machine that I made and then a full length YouTube video, and it just didn't do well at all. Like
Hmm.
some of those shorts didn't even make it over. Like I can't remember exactly what the numbers were, but they're below 100,000 views. So for me to post something that then blew up the way that the most recent one did, my first thought was product market fit. So I guess up to this point, I've kind of been experimenting, not entirely sure exactly what I'm doing. I started off making more like specifically art related stuff. And somewhere along the way, I decided to switch from my former name, which was JBV Creative, to what it is now, which is Engineezy,
Hmm.
because I was thinking I could, through this whole process, all my shorts and content along the way is more about the engineering process than it is about the art that I was trying to create. So I decided to focus more on the engineering side of things. And along the way, I made a couple different ball machines. And I've always loved ball machines since I was a kid. So my recent project is a big ball machine. And I think that the reason why it's doing well is just all the Venn diagrams of the things that are what I do. I found like the exact center of it, and that's my it's a hypothesis. I don't know for sure.
And the cool thing about that video is that it's not like the big final reveal. It's just the wind up to, what you're going to reveal. And I think it's incredible that that is what is popping off right now. So that follows the 7 segment display, which I thought was what kind of took you into, like you said, it's how the market fit. I think when you moved into the 7 segment display, that really is where you moved into that market fit with like the audience appeal with the YouTube audience.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think it's interesting, moving away from art and moving more towards just like fun engineering projects. I think it hits a wider audience.
Hmm.
I think when you make something, like a lot of the stuff that I was making was like, or is what I wanted to be making was stuff that was like a little bit more derivative. Like you had to understand what the societal problem that I was speaking to was to understand exactly what I was doing. But I'd make these machines, and then people would be like, "Well, what does it do?" And I think it's just a little bit more broad reaching, the engineering itself, and then especially something like a 7 segment display, which everyone has seen, but no one's really seen the mechanical version of it or thought about the fact that that even exists. And I think it just captured people's imagination in a way
Hmm.
that it was easy to understand what it does and what it can be used for. That was the video that really blew up. Was the one was like, what can I use this for? And I think that got people excited. So yeah, that was definitely an interesting. We'll call it a result of the experiment, the Engineezy experiment. You know, from a broader standpoint.
It was a great video. Absolutely. You mentioned you're moving away from art, and are you moving away from art in the style of your videos, or do you think you're moving away from art just in general in your whole process?
I think it's more in the like overall idea. So previously, m- my current project right now that I'm making is like it's artistic in a way, but it's not artistic in the way where I'm like making a statement on society, which if you saw my conveyor belt project,
Yeah, that the
um,
big one.
yeah, exactly. That one was like, like we're on our phones too much, and people are like looking like idiots running into walls. That was kind of like the statement that I was making. The
Hmm.
project that I'm working on now is more like I'm going to use marbles to make a really cool picture, and I guess that's artistic in a sense, but there's different kinds of art, right? I guess one is like aesthetic art, and like I think that's something that is a lot easier to understand, and it doesn't require like thinking about it. It's sort of like I don't know. I guess even like the art that you make is very aesthetic in its nature. It's designed to look cool. It kind of like represents waves and nature in ways, but we're not like looking for. You don't have to look for a deeper meaning in it. It's more, like this looks really cool.
You had that wave sculpture that also did very well, and I thought it was aesthetically pleasing. It also it did take off, and the people loved that.
Definitely.
Okay, I have to admit, I'm a little disappointed to hear that you're moving away from art, but that's
Well, it's not permanent. It's not a permanent move, but I want to be able to do this sustainably, and I want to be able to I don't know. I want to be able to work with people and have like a bigger space to make bigger things. And it's hard to do that
I
if
was going to ask about that.
yeah, it's really hard to do that if no one's like, like watching your stuff. So I think I think I'm not moving away from art forever. It's just for the time being, I'm going to try to build my career in doing fun engineering contraptions, we'll call it, very broad. And it's a space that I think more people can relate to and be excited about. But I think that the part of me that wants to make like really, I don't know, quote unquote, like deep art pieces making statements about society, that's never going to go away. It's just something that, it, um, I think every artist has to find a compromise somewhere along the way if they want to be able to do this for a career. And that's kind of, this is my compromise. It's like, I get to really still express myself creatively, and I get to like, do cool stuff with video, and I get to kind of do all the same stuff that I was doing, just it has a different end purpose.
Yeah, so you mentioned upgrading your studio, and I noticed you already invested in like a laser cutter. You're kind of moving past just using 3D printing and the traditional 3D printing add-ons like screws and aluminum extrusion. Like in the video, the last video, the bubble machine video, you ordered some like a metal 3D printed parts. So my question is this your plan to sort of branch out? Kind of like I imagine your channel being more like stuff made here, because I really feel like that's kind of the direction you're moving in. Do you feel like you're going to build out a bigger shop with CNC machines and like, bigger equipment? Is that your goal?
That has actually always been the goal from the get go. So stuff made here, his shop is like a dream shop for me to have a laser
Right.
and a water jet, and like I think he just got like a 5-axis CNC machine. Basically, if he could dream it, he could build it. And right now, I'm kind of limited to if I can dream it in like plastic and I don't know, I guess a little bit of wood and like aluminum extrusions, I can build it. But until I have the space and the ability to just make, like 8x4 or even 10x5 sheets of material into something, I am always going to have to compromise on the way that I do things. And I've definitely like outsourced stuff in the past, but the way that I operate, it's really hard to do that. Like I design something and basically it's on the printers the second I'm done designing it.
Yeah,
So
it's like a go go go,
yeah,
and
exactly.
you have to order it, and then it doesn't work out. Even like especially in the bubble video, I was wondering how you managed to adapt to the new plan now that you had already printed and ordered all those parts.
Yeah, exactly. So I ended up using the parts, and one of the things I did was I put a bunch of extra holes in them that I didn't know if I would need. And then
Hmm.
luckily it was aluminum, so I was able to like drill the holes bigger when I needed to, and kind of just move on the fly. But that's the big problem with that is like, it took, we'll call it all in, like 2 weeks to go from ordering the parts to having them in my hands to realizing that the whole thing wasn't going to work. And so I wasn't able to redesign parts to fix that problem. So
Hmm.
I think that's also just like that's content creation where we're basically the amount of money we make is dependent on the amount of content that we're able to put out, I think, to some degree.
Mhm.
And also, like, I'm still in the process of like testing and trying to figure out what I'm actually doing. So I don't have a lot of time to spend, and like to wait another 2 weeks for the parts to turn around again. I find that to be very stressful actually. I like that I can just make something and like quickly turn around. And when you watch stuff made here, you can see like that's his process as well. He recently just did a video where he designed a tiny bike, and one of his parts needed to be redesigned, and because of that, everything needed to be redesigned. And he was able to just like make it happen. I'm sure it was not that easy, but
Right, he started the video saying, "Oh, my plan was just to make this one bike," but obviously in the process, he ended up making so many, variations, right? Just kinda going with, adapting to the situation.
exactly. And that's like the iterative process. And I think if you're working in the corporate world, engineering process takes a long time, and corporations are a little bit more equipped to handle the delays and the time it takes. But if you're a single person running a YouTube channel, and you not only like have to move fast, but you can move fast because you're making all the decisions, having manufacturing equipment that can keep up with that speed is also very important as well. And I think having the skills to use them all is equally important. It also, I think, and this is a big thing, is it changes the way you design things.
You have an extensive background as an engineer, but now that you're a YouTuber, I see like there's like this competing forces here, which is as an engineer, you want to engineer a certain solution, and maybe like the first version that you make is like 70% of what you wanted it to be. But as an engineer, of course, you're going to go back and you're going to fix it until it meets the specification. But as a YouTuber, your goal is to make the video. So I could tell in the bubble making video that you really wanted to make the bubble machine work. That was your goal. Do you think that your priorities are more shifting to just adapt to make the video work? Or do you still think that you have that engineering mindset where you just really want that original idea or the goal, the engineering perspective? Do you want that to work? Do you see any conflict there? And do you feel like you're moving in one way or the other?
I definitely like the conflict there is actually like it's a constant battle. I don't think I'm moving in one way over the other. I think that I've set like a rubric for how done something needs to be for the video, and I'll push the video back as many times as I have to in order to reach what I would say is my standard for a successful project. Because I'm a YouTuber, but my YouTube videos are about these projects that I'm creating, and I think it wouldn't be authentic to like, I don't know, you can fake a lot of things for a video, but I don't find it authentic
Yeah.
to do that.
Mhm.
And
Just pretend that the goal was this and then make the video out of it,
yeah,
even though that wasn't. Mhm.
exactly. Yeah, like you can rewrite the story as much as you want, but ultimately the story for me is always I have this idea for this thing that I want to make, and like this is the battle of how to make it. So the video doesn't go out no matter, even if I have sponsors, I always just push it. And so far all my sponsors have actually been okay with it. But yeah, I think for me, I've set the kind of upper limit at like 80% done. And by that, I mean, it could probably use one more iteration for it to become like a long functioning prototype, we'll call it. For example,
Mhm.
the conveyor belt sculpture, I ended up bringing that sculpture that I made to San Francisco to showcase at Open Sauce, which is like a big science
Mhm.
fair event. And I got there, and the thing just like it would work for 20 minutes and then it would stop working. And then I would like
Mhm.
jig some things. There's like people there with the 3D printer. So I'd get someone to print me a part that broke, and then it would work again for 20 minutes and then break. For a YouTube video, that is absolutely fine because it showed the essence of the machine. It worked fully. It was functional. It just wasn't designed to be showcased at an event. And for me, like for someone who, I think everyone kind of has this, but I don't have a like take it to 95 or 100% personality. I'm like, if I see it working 80%, my vision's been realized and I'm happy and I'm ready to move on. And it's actually funny, like for in the the mechanical displays video that I made, the whole reason I made that was because I was planning to design this mechanical video game, and I was really excited about the idea, and I just like had this vision of like hitting a button and the thing jumps over obstacles, and then there'd be like a digital display, or sorry, mechanical display to show your score. And so I built a cardboard prototype and I got the mechanical display working, and I kind of feel like I've played my game now. And even though it was like a cardboard prototype, the game was kind of working to like a certain degree, and I've lost my steam on that project.
Hmm.
I,
But the segment counter, it lives on
yes, the segment counter
as
lives
the.
on for sure. And I think as a professional, like this is what I do professionally, I feel like I have to finish that project, but I don't know when I'm going to do that because it's, like Marvel machines are definitely way more exciting for me to build. And yeah, there's lots of fun ideas, but I guess at some point someone's going to be like, what happened to that? And I'm like, I have to bring it back and finish it.
I think that it's a common thing that you start one project with one goal, and then it's just like this tiny new, like this little tiny piece of that project. Then suddenly, because maybe like the original idea that you had was good, but when you're actually like trying to solve the specific problems, those very tiny problems, maybe those haven't been touched on as much by other people because they're so specific, and then you end up coming up with a really genius solution to them, or making something unique, and that's when you end up hitting upon what really creates success. I think that happens a lot, over and over and over, and with the 7 segment display, I think that's what's happening. Do you agree with that?
100%. That
And has that happened before in other
Yeah,
projects?
actually, on every single project, I end up going down these. I've been calling them side quests, but they're really just things just steal my attention, and then I like give it more than I should. But in the end, I've actually found exactly what you're saying was like sometimes those things really they pay dividends, and so I've allowed myself to just like go down these rabbit holes and see wherever it takes me, and often like at the very least, I end up with like fun content that people enjoy. And at the worst, like I've like explored something that I like didn't know a lot about, and now I do, and then I can keep moving forward. So yeah, I do try to let myself explore a little bit, but not too much. There's got to be a balance.
Hmm. So I'm wondering, what do you do? You mentioned you're moving away from art, but like after you're done making the original, like you sell the STLs, but you have the original, especially like the big one, like the conveyor belt. What do you do with the pieces? Do you often sell them? Do you put them in a warehouse? Do you deconstruct them? What happens to those pieces?
Yeah, they all go and live until eternity in my parents' basement. So
Hmm.
that's what it is. I think the thing is, like, a lot of those pieces do need to be like iterated on if they were to live outside of my parents' basement. So, for example, I made a basketball sculpture that like shot basketballs back and forth, and that was actually supposed to live in a gallery, but it didn't exactly work the way it was supposed to. There was problems with the sensors and the motors, so I have to go and basically just like play around with it for a week, swap the motors out, figure out some better sensors to use, and it would work 100%. But I've moved forward. So for now, it all just lives in my parents' basement. And I guess I figured if someone was really, really interested in it, then I would be able to go back and do what I had to do. But until then, I think it's just fun to keep moving forward.
I think in my own process, you see, the thing about my process and your process, I find a lot of parallels. Like, for example, like you have an engineering process, like someone was morally curt. He asked you, where do you find the flow? And you say it was, well, it's during the assembly phase. Well, by the time you get to the assembly phase, you've already done most of the actual, creative part, most of the like the creation, the idea. The assembly part is like just when you finally like, is this is working? This is actually working, and I'm excited, right? And then you say like, when it comes together though, maybe it's only 80% or 85%, and there's like that last 15% that makes it that you really wish you can go back to make it a perfect sculpture or a perfect mechanism. Which I feel like in my art, the same thing happens. Is where I start in the CAD, you plan out the whole process, and then by the time I'm done, there's like this 15% that I know could have been improved, and I really don't want to sell that piece because I wish I could go back and do the 15%. So I see that there's a lot of parallels there.
Definitely. I think part of the reason why I've decided to focus more on my YouTube content is because I'm not a good like 100% project finisher. If that makes sense to you. Like
Yeah.
your work, like, I think it's maybe about the 15% that isn't there, but from my standpoint, it's like perfect, you know? So I think
Well, I mean, you see it in the video. You don't
yeah,
actually like if you saw it in person, you might notice it.
maybe, but it doesn't have to function. So there's a little bit of a difference there. Like,
Well, it functions in its aestheticness. Like you plan on putting the resin on in a certain, like making a certain coating, or you plan on doing a certain composite. And did that composite turn out the way you wanted it to? So it kind of functions in the aesthetic result that you get from it. And then you have to try it again to get that exact aesthetic result that you're looking for. So I just want to go back for a minute to the latest video that had a lot of success on YouTube. Obviously, it's got 6 million views in just 4 days. That's incredible. But on TikTok, it has it didn't do bad. It's like a few 100,000 views or something like that. But the number one comment you get on TikTok there, I noticed, is, "So you've invented an ice dispenser," and it has like 200 likes, and it's like the only major like comment. And I completely understand that because that's exactly what happens to my videos often on TikTok. How do you deal with that? Do you think TikTok is giving you a different reaction to YouTube? How do you see the difference in the different platforms?
I guess TikTok for me is just like a dump platform. Like I just dump all the videos that I make for Instagram and YouTube onto it because, well, why not? I don't know if I fully understand TikTok or understand the algorithms, but I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it. But for YouTube and Instagram, I think it's a little bit different, and I'm not entirely sure why. But I do know like my style of videos do perform very well on Instagram and YouTube, and then TikTok is kind of like it feels random. Like it feels like I don't know if you're rewarded for volume or what, but I have no idea. So
I think my intuition is that the algorithm is more hedonistic in its, just get whatever it is that you want to watch, no matter what it is. Whereas YouTube and Instagram are really trying to kind of give a I don't know, focus on certain higher um, things. Yeah, sorry to cut you off, but I'm just saying that that's what I think the algorithmic difference between the TikTok and the YouTube Shorts is.
yeah, that's an interesting perspective. Honestly, I have absolutely no idea. For me, I would just imagine they all kind of do the same thing. Like they all have the same goal, which is like keep people on the platform for as long as possible. And I guess they all have a
Hmm.
different way of achieving that goal. But yeah, I don't I don't know. I don't know.
So the top comment was, "So you invented an ice dispenser," which is very dismissive. It's snarky, and that's kind of what I get also on TikTok, which is in contrast to the last podcast I did was with Michael Wong, Above Wong Art, and he does really well on TikTok. He does Oni masks and 3D printing Oni masks and different in his art. He kind of experiments with 3D printing, and he does really well on TikTok. And he says that his harshest comments come on YouTube. So I thought it was really interesting how these different platforms have these different audiences, and depending on which one you vibe with, you're going to get harsh comments on one, and you're going to have a better reaction on the other one. Do you feel that?
My thoughts on that, like I get tons of harsh comments on YouTube as well. And I think a big part of
Mhm,
it is TikTok and YouTube are both a lot more anonymous than like Instagram, for example. You know, like
mhm, that's true.
people have accounts, but they don't post anything, so they're they're not really as connected to like someone's person. They're more just a it's just a digital profile, and I think like I don't know. I think it makes sense maybe on TikTok if maybe if you post often and you build like a little community, maybe it's likely that you might get less hateful comments. Although I think that there's it's the same on all platforms. There's just people who I don't know exactly what the like if, why they feel threatened by the creation of things, and like I'm sure that's kind of the responses that you get as well. And I think that also comes down to like often people don't fully understand what goes into even making something as simple as like an auger driven ball dispenser, like the amount of hours and thought and I think we can easily take stuff like that for granted. Like we don't know how much goes
Mhm.
into the ice maker design in our freezers. We're just like upset when it doesn't work. But as an
Exactly, yeah.
engineer, I know how much work goes into designing a system like that so it does work more often than it doesn't.
Mhm.
um, I just think though, like it's easy for people who aren't doing things to spend time on social media and like I don't know, making negative comments that it just really doesn't bother me. And yeah, I just like I guess I just don't really care.
Yeah, I mean, your analysis is right. It is well, that's the thing about art, and not just art. I mean, the thing about show business actually is that the hard part is what's hidden, and you're making it look easy, right? So, and it's really like the magic. That's why it's movie magic. What really happened wasn't as it appeared, and in our case, what really happened, not being as it appeared, was what really happened was a really huge amount of work. And if it wasn't such a huge amount of work, difficult work, it wouldn't I mean everyone would be doing it and it wouldn't be interesting to watch because it would just be everyone making something simple. So that movie magic is sort of conflicting with I don't know that it's conflicting with what we're doing, which is you're kind of you're educating them about what it is that needs to be done to make these projects. But also, I mean this is the medium. We work with the medium. It kind of chose us and we didn't choose it so much. I mean, I don't think that ideally I like to make long form videos myself because you can explain the nuances, right? But people, for me, people don't want to watch my long form videos as much as they want to watch the short form. How do you um you've had a lot of success actually, kind of a rare success in that you were able to make long form and short form content and both of it is being watched. What do you think about that?
I think well, okay, for starters, I think one of the interesting things that you said is like all of the work that goes into and I know that like you have years and years of experience behind the work that you do because your projects are so complex and they just come together so
Hmm.
seamlessly. And I know how many times
Hmm.
you've made things that didn't come together that seamlessly in order to be able to do it
Hmm.
so seemingly seamless. It's kind of a weird combo of words, but and it's the same for me. It's just so many years of just building things that didn't work and learning and I think going back to what we were talking about before, like even if I don't perfect a project, it's the stuff that I learned and the stuff that I would have changed go into my next project. So it allows me to be a little bit more efficient with my designing and then to then take that and be able to like explain the process. This has actually been a huge part of what I've had to learn over the last 4 years was how to explain my process, like how to take something that I just do and tell people how I do it in a way that's interesting And I think short form really, like, short form saved my social media career, we'll call it, because I was ready to quit. No one was really watching my long form videos. Projects that I slaved over and was so excited about just didn't perform that well, and I just didn't know why. But short form gave me the opportunity to try lots and lots and lots of things and gave me feedback.
Mhm.
So I would make a video and then it would perform or it wouldn't. And I would create hypotheses on why it did or didn't, and then try to recreate things. And like those hypotheses wouldn't work or they would. And I think it's the same thing for long form. I think now finally, and this is even after the bubble video, like really, really underperforming what I expected. I think I've had enough reps in the long form videos that I can start making better. It's not even better videos. I feel like the quality of my videos has consistently improved over time. And my bubble video is actually my best video that I have edited so far, I think. But it's more making better choices in what projects that I'm selecting. And so this current project that
Mhm.
I'm working on now it's a big project, but it's four small projects or five small projects put together. And I actually haven't even like explained to anyone in short form what I'm doing. And because of that, I'm getting a lot of like, oh, bro, just created like an ice maker.
Mhm.
But I think when it
But you don't have the time to explain all this stuff. That's the thing.
Yeah, but it's also kind of by design. Like I'm by design not explaining what it's all going to be because I want to try to like keep people guessing what it's going to do. And then when I
Mhm.
finally like say like the project's finished, I'm hoping that their curiosity is like stoked enough that they're going to go and watch the video or they're going to watch the short
Yeah, that
form that comes out after that. And
mhm.
that's kind of my strategy, but that's also another hypothesis. Like I was thinking it might be better to explain like this is what I'm building, here's where I'm at, and give people the context.
Mhm.
It's definitely something worth testing down the road, but for
Mhm.
now this is the strategy.
Yeah, I too I just started breaking up my shorts into. I wanted to like make it a multi-part series. Just started that, but I think that your approach is better than the one that I took, which is you keep you don't even start the video with "I'm working on a bigger project." You don't even mention that until like halfway through the video. This video was about this sub project, and then you don't explain what the bigger project is. It's just whatever it is. It includes this little project, and that was a fantastic approach because I started my video with and this sort of rendering or like a almost sketch rendering is what I'm working on, and I think that's not creating the that curiosity. But I wanted to ask, so you're making you're learning a lot about your techniques. So I'm curious. Obviously, a lot of your time is spent in SolidWorks. Do you intentionally not showcase that a lot? What is your approach to like showcasing? I'm sure you get a lot of requests. Oh, teach me SolidWorks this and teach me this in Solid. What is your approach to making content on screen, like in SolidWorks or in the computer, doing something on this screen? What is your approach to that?
I think generally up to this point I've sort of decided that I think people find that part boring, which is funny because that is the entire part. And if you watch, I don't know if you've ever watched Ivan Miranda. Have you ever seen any of his videos?
I've probably seen it. I just don't. The name doesn't click with me right now.
If you haven't, you need to. Like his work is incredible. But he does a really great job, and he's actually someone that I'm sort of modeling after a little bit of. For me, it's like I have this problem, I need to solve it. I go into CAD, I like solve it, I print it out, blah blah blah. But for the way he kind of shows it, he's like, okay, I need something to go here, and then here's my solution. Rather than like,
I know Ivan Miranda. Yeah,
yeah,
he's making a marble clock right now,
yes, he
right?
is exactly.
All right.
So it's kind of an interesting approach because it is the way that you approach it, but for the storytelling point of view, it's a little bit different. Like it's if you watch a Lego video, it feels like they don't spend any time planning out their builds. They just kind of like grab Lego and start building. But I know that they're planning out their builds. The part that people like to watch is the actual building. And they like to think you could just like sit there and like grab random pieces and then make something incredible with it. And I think that that is the most exciting way to go about things. And I think from at least for engineering project YouTube videos, I think for me that what I find the most enjoyable is here's a problem and like I have to figure it out. And then me as the watcher, I'm like, how would I do it? And then I see how they would do it. And it's like very satisfying to watch that like combination of things come together. And I think it's interesting, like for you, your projects fall more on the aesthetic sculpture side of things. I think people don't really question that. I think what's interesting about your work from my perspective, from someone who's interested in art, is like how you paint and like how you make things look so nice, and like what's the process for like smoothing your prints. And I think from an engineering standpoint, there's a little bit less to talk about for what I would guess your audience would be. Maybe just
Mhm.
because, like, I think your videos do well because they're just so aesthetically pleasing, and it's very satisfying to watch your pieces to come together. I think my videos, what I found was I was trying to make the art part, and it wasn't fitting with the market of people who were watching my stuff. The stuff that was doing well was like gears and things spinning and like mechanisms. And when it got to the final part, like I would get like, let's say, millions of views in the whole process, but then I get to the final project and no one would watch it. And I think it's because I just lost people at the very, very end.
Yeah, they were interested. I think you're absolutely right that there is this dichotomy: the people who like the engineering aspect, who like the clever aspect of it, and the aesthetic aspect. What is it? The way the sine wave, the balls rolling, the, the aesthetic aspect, but they aren't interested in the art process aspect of it, I guess, which is also I think the challenge that I'm running up against, which is they like also my 3D printing. I do have a big bulk of my audience is truly interested in the art aspect, but I think also a huge percent of it is the same audience that you have, which is interested in the 3D printing, interested in the painting, and I'm trying to fuse them together. But in your videos, you're also kind of fusing this together. But I feel like you're doing a better job at just at being consistent in your like recently I'm trying like I'm trying to I started like a lot doing live streaming, and I know that you do live streaming occasionally. You do like a build or
I
unboxing or
tried it,
something.
but it's hard. It's hard to live stream.
Yeah, so do you think it's hard, but is it rewarding? Like, do you think there is even like a version of what we do, makers and engineers, that is just kind of focused on live, some kind of building process live, and people just that goes viral? Do you think that's even possible?
I think I think the process of making things is very boring. So, I think like for me, even if I was doing like what you were doing, for example, like anytime I have to do something repetitive over and over and over again, I'll put on like a podcast or I'll put on an audiobook because it just makes me absolutely crazy having to repeat things. And I think in a live stream, it's really hard to like make that interesting. Maybe if you were a particularly funny person, maybe like cracking jokes the whole time, like people keep people engaged. Maybe in like a live design session, which I had done a few times, and like I had a consistent set of people coming in, but I think it was like the engagement of like helping me figure out how to make things
Hmm.
is potentially interesting. But I think in the case of a Herschel Shapiro sculpture, where it's like you paint the same thing like 500 times, and then like basically are lining it up with your back plate 500 times. And I think that there is like a real like that is what art is. Like when you think about like what a painter does, like they sketch out a painting, but then they have to spend hours and hours just making brushstrokes. And like your brushstrokes are the same thing as, or sorry, a painter's brushstrokes is the same thing as like you like placing, like these little pieces onto the back plate. And I think that no matter what, it's always going to be boring. Like it might even be boring for you, but there's like a satisfactory point of like building towards something. I think I don't know. I don't know if I'm like a great person to ask on that, but when I look at the things that live stream the best is people playing video games. And I think that there's just something
Hmm.
inherently interesting about watching someone play video games or playing sports or something like that. I think there's like a little bit more drama, like can he make it happen kind of thing. I don't know. I think with live streaming like builds, it might be boring unless you're invested in like a long-term process. Yeah, I don't.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. See, that was a terrible idea on my part. I kind of had this idea that I would, because it takes so long for me to finish a project, I needed to make some new kind of content that I could then, keep people updated what I'm doing. And live, I could just turn the camera on, just do whatever. If I'm making the third edition of a sculpture, that's not a video. I can't make the same sculpture, same video a third time and say, this is the third time I made this
Yeah,
sculpture.
it's true.
So I wanted to do live, but that's not going to work, I realized, because it's boring. In my mind, I was thinking, how can I make this less boring? And that's kind of where the idea of this podcast came in. Is I was planning on using this pod, kind of like this TikTok mixed content where you put on the left side one thing and put on the right side a different thing.
Hmm.
That was kind of what I wanted to do, is kind of put this podcast as part of this live content idea. But just like your 7 segment display, I think the podcast can live on its own. And what you said was actually pretty profound, which is to focus. It's really about picking the right project, and making videos about the right project. Maybe I shouldn't pick these projects that take months just to do, or breaking the videos up like you do. That would be a much better objective for me. And I think that, what you're doing is inspiring me and others one way or another.
On that note, I think though it's also
Hmm.
interesting because as a content creator, the metrics for success are very different than the metrics for success of an artist, right? So like the art that you make is incredible, but if it doesn't perform and not but and if it doesn't perform on Instagram or YouTube, it doesn't change like how amazing the stuff that you're making is. It just means that it might
That's
not
true.
be
Yeah.
perfect content, like perfect, like it might not be like an idea that is like really worthy of like, which this isn't even true because you have a lot of success in your videos, but I think that ultimately what it comes down to is again like what I said earlier was which is product market fit, where you kind of end up in between two niches, like a 3D printing
Hmm.
niche and an art niche. And I think that this doesn't define your skill and it doesn't define like how good your art is. And I think this is like, when I made the decision to be like, okay, I'm not going to just like wholeheartedly be an artist here. I'm going to change like my business model, we'll call it, because this is a business. It was so I could kind of escape being in between the two niches. But
Hmm.
I could have just as easily gone and focused on art, put a lot of less emphasis on how my videos are performing, and like go down a very different road. But this was just the road I decided to go down. And I think that it's a for any artist out there who's trying to make it on social media, it's like an important thing to remember is like social media doesn't define like your skill level or how good your art is. It really just defines like how good are you at making things that are video worthy, and like how good are you at picking the first 3 seconds of a video to capture people's attention so they don't keep scrolling, like stupid little things like that. So
Yeah, I think, yeah, you're right. I'm spending too much time on the video making aspect. I didn't mean to make our conversation about giving myself advice, because I wanted to save that to later. So now, even though we've already talked about some of my process, I guess we're going to delve deeper, because I wanted to pick your mind as an engineer to get some advice about a couple projects that,
okay.
oh, not just your engineering perspective on a few things. And the first one is I constantly get, there's two things that I've constantly people comment that they wish they could see. The first is the LED sculptures. They've always asked for that, and I did that, and it worked kind of nice. And I'm thinking of doing more of that. But the other one is kinetic sculptures, and both of those I've always had just an intuition that I kind of wanted to stay away from that. And for the kinetic sculptures, like you did the flower sculpture with every piece is rotating, right? How many parts are moving in that sculpture? And if you were to ship that to some other country and they were going to hang it on their wall, and do you like guarantee that they're going to call you in a certain amount of time and say this part is broken, or or is my intuition wrong about that? These part, as long as you make it well, it could, be reliable on that wall for many years. I mean, what is your intuition on a sculpture like that flower sculpture with so many moving parts?
My intuition is I always have a fear that it's going to break.
Hmm.
The flowers actually, it never broke. It still runs to this day, which is amazing. And I guess the only way to really like put something through its paces is to just let it run forever and see what happens. And actually, on that note, there's a creator called his name is Daniel DeBruin, and he built a test rig and has it running and counting how many cycles it's done. And like it's built with string and whatever different parts, and the string is all frayed. But the thing is at like 6 million or maybe even more cycles now. And so I think that things like a motor will run for a very, very long time. And I think maybe my intuition is if I was selling things to exist in the real world in someone's home, for example, I would run a lot of tests to see how long things could run for. And, like long term tests also would need to be done for how the material holds up. And I've actually, like, from some of my old projects, a lot of the things that I press fit a bearing into, the ring around the bearing cracks. I guess it's because I'm putting too much stress on the parts. So it's important information to know and adjust for. And really, the only way to learn that stuff is to just, I guess, do it and see what happens. But it is definitely my fear, which is also why I think I prefer to make YouTube content. It's because I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, that's true. But it would essentially have to be like a research and development project for every sculpture. It would have to go through a whole testing phase where, yeah, you really have to prove it out before you can. And if it was just one piece, then that wouldn't work. That would just be infeasible. If it was just a one addition, it was just a one piece sculpture. But it wouldn't just be like I would imagine like if it had like in the flower sculpture you had bearings and they're all connected by gears, right? And there's only one motor that was controlling them all, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But a lot of the kinetic sculpture ideas would essentially end up having a servo or some motor that would need to independently control each piece, because every piece would be like a pattern, like a flowing pattern where each piece had to move in its own. I mean, I guess there could be like a ridiculous amount of cams, right? Like they used to make those automatons.
Yeah.
I guess you could end up doing something like that. Which I wanted to ask you, like you about friction. Like you have a lot of moving parts. You have all these gears and things. And are you using a? I noticed at one point. What is this white filament that you always using? Is it the same one, or is it changing?
No, it's the same one. It's eSun PLA Plus, and
Right? Is it
it's
the cold white? Right?
cold white. Exactly. It's just I just like the color
Yeah.
of it, and it seems to be consistently good. Although honestly, in like the last year, something's changed and it gets a little bit brittle. But as far as
Hmm.
everything that my purposes, for all my purposes, it just works, and it's become kind of part of my
Yeah, it's the
brand.
same one that I use.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah, it's the same. It's the exact same one that I use. Yeah, that's kind of
and
interesting.
it's easy to get too, which is important. Like I can get it from
Exactly.
many
It's easy
different
to
sources.
source.
Yeah, like it's never been out of stock.
Because these are 3D printed, there's always the layer lines. Isn't that a problem for you constantly that you're having this friction between the pieces?
I
Or that's not an issue unless it's a specific mechanism?
Yeah, I mean, you got to be strategic about how things line up. Like if parts are sliding, it's you got to make sure that they're sliding along the layer lines, like almost always.
Hmm.
But and I have been using a lot of bearings lately. This is actually like more of a newer thing in my process. By newer, I mean like in the last 2 years. It wasn't always, but the bearings really help with that, and it kind of just like gives me a little bit more peace of mind that things are gonna like work really well. But often PLA on PLA, it slides quite well. And you put a little bit of WD-40, and the WD-40 sort of soaks into the PLA, and it kind of lasts
Hmm.
forever, which is amazing, actually. I've never really had problems, and like you could switch to Pet G. I think Pet G is a little bit more like a little less friction, but it really depends on what you're making. Like if if it was like a Herschel Shapiro sculpture where all the parts spun to orient in different directions to create different patterns, is that kind of like where your head's at with that kind of thing?
No, actually, if you have a browser, can you open this up? It's
Yep,
the it's Dr. Thing. You know him,
of
right? Yeah,
course.
you have a video
He's my
where you
boy.
mention him.
That's my
It's the elliptical mechanism on a sphere number 4, right?
elliptical.
Now, we talked about this before. I talked to you once about how I make this. Is like originally I wanted to make this. I have this grand vision for a kinetic sculpture. It's the only one that I've had a vision for, and I've been working on it. And I actually got around to building a prototype, but it doesn't work because of friction, particularly at the point where it goes and then it reverses in the track. Because at
Yeah.
that point, the at that point it there's just too much friction, and I'm thinking of like I have to use like a resin printer with some special material that's super frictionless. I mean, so I wanted to pick your mind. What do you think would be a good solution for this particular? I mean, I don't think a PLA would work. A
No,
PLA on PLA
not
would
for
work
this
for this
one.
kind of a groove. Hmm.
Elliptical mechanism on a sphere which one? Number four?
Yeah, it's made. It's not exactly the same, but it's almost the mechanism is the same, even though the result is much different.
So I can't see number four here, but I can see number three.
He has a short. Yeah. Let's see.
And
Look at
I feel
me.
like they're all kind of the same. The spherical, yeah, they're probably just a different path. First thought that comes to my mind would be like resin. You have to resin print these parts. Uh, Even then, though, it'd be hard to do that. You'd have to maybe SLS print them, like
What
in
is it?
in
Like
like
a
a
metal?
nylon powder,
Mm-hmm.
because you can print without you can get very fine prints, and they can print without supports, and that would allow you to get like the sphere without, because if you were doing the sphere with an SLA machine, I think I might be stereo, yeah, SLA, you need like, it would need supports to be like on the interior of the spheres, the slots in the sphere, and I think it'd be very
Mm-hmm.
very hard to clean those out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's
Alternatively,
what happened.
yeah,
That's one of
yeah,
the things that happened.
yeah. I mean, that's a tricky mechanism. This is the kind of mechanism where I was working at a toy company, and I had this like very like this genius level engineer, and he would design something like this that works so well in theory, but in practice it would be like impossible to actually manufacture it.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of thing stuff is very theoretical. I think that none of this
Right.
stuff, that's actually like one of the main reasons I started doing what I'm doing, is so I could use things, mechanisms for like no good reason, because
Hmm.
there's like not a lot of opportunities to use this stuff in the real world. But anyways, going back to how you would manufacture that, maybe multi-axis CNC, you could potentially like cut the grooves.
Out of some nylon, maybe something
Yeah,
like that.
or Delrin. Delrin's very slippery material. It's like a That's the brand name for it. I think it's called acetyl.
Hmm.
And like in the toy industry, we use that a lot of Delrin, because it's very slippery and doesn't require any lubrication. But I don't know. That's a tricky one. Alternatively, I'm just looking at it again. You might be able to print it in parts, and orient the grooves to be along the layer line. So, and then like in 2D.
Well, I separated out the sphere from like a rail, right? I printed just the rail. It's like an arc.
Yeah.
The rail is now just an arc, and then I can orient that however I want. But even then, it's just that it's the torque when because somehow when it gets to the end of that thing, it's that rotational energy isn't being like the energy from the rotational is so little at that point to get it to turn around. The friction at that very end of the path just
Mm-hmm.
has to be so non-existent for it to then smoothly just reverse direction.
Yeah. I
That's
think,
so it really has to be super smooth, I think.
yeah, it's actually, it's a very interesting thing. Like a lot of times, like I'll often like in my content, I'll get a comment like, why didn't you just simulate this in CAD? And I think it's because in
Hmm.
CAD, everything works exactly the way it's supposed to. And in the real world, even a
Right.
tiny bit of flex with a millimeter of, or even less than a millimeter, can cause like the sliding piece to jam into that slot.
Or like in the bubble, like it didn't close like tightly, and you weren't able, and it wasn't like it didn't close tightly. But in the CAD program, of course, it would have closed perfectly.
Yeah,
But in
exactly.
reality, it didn't tightly close enough to create the new
Yeah.
bubble.
And I actually
Like,
knew that was going to happen in that stupid I just went for it anyways, hoping that I could get it to work, but in this, like the ellipse mechanism on a sphere, honestly, I wouldn't even attempt it. I would,
just don't even try.
yeah, I think there's just some
Yeah.
things that like yeah, you could if you had like very very precise machines and like I don't know, like a 5-axis, maybe even, yeah, a 5-axis machine could cut a pretty good groove. But even then, I think it would be hard to get it to work really well.
Right. I'm actually considering getting 5 axis. Like they have manufacturers who make like little ones. They're almost like 3D printer
Yeah,
size.
pocket, is it
And
Pocket
I
NC?
wanted
Is
to
that the one
get
you're looking at?
um no, because it was like on all the ones I was looking at were just on Alibaba or
Oh,
AliExpress. But I mean that was just because I'm in the research phase. I'm not actually
yeah.
committed to any of these. Um, but the idea would be to get these small CNCs that are like 3D printer size and create like a printer farm out of them, and then I can make a whole bunch of pieces and with a CNC the same way I make a whole bunch of pieces with 3D printers.
Hmm.
Do you have any experience with the these smaller 5 axis machines? Do you think that they have enough reliability or versatility to do something like that?
I mean, I've only ever used the Pocket NC, which is, it was a great machine, but it was really small and very underpowered. Like it
Hmm.
just took a very very long time to make things. I mean, obviously, like
Hmm.
once you have like a tool path figured out, you basically just turn off the lights and let it run. So it's like a 3D printer. But I mean, they're almost $7,000 for this machine. So I don't know if that would be very viable to build a farm of those. I don't. I
Hmm.
haven't seen anything else really, like other 5-axis machines. Is there anything? I'm looking here on AliExpress right now.
It was just 5 axis CNC, and
Hmm.
because they're shipping them from China, they just naturally they make smaller ones. Is what I noticed.
Yeah. So far, it doesn't. I don't see anything that's that cheap.
But that would be cool because if I could transition into something like that using 5 axis CNC, I think it would be really cool to move into a new materials. And that's kind of what you said that you wanted to do, right? Isn't that I mean, you have the laser cutter. Is there any other big equipment that you're willing to discuss that you're going to be getting soon? Anything coming up in your channel,
Nothing. No, nothing at the moment.
processes or
I think I
techniques?
need to get the new shop first. With right now, I'm working out of the basement of my house, so I can't even really like bringing the laser cutter down here, which is like a desktop laser, was already quite a production. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, 3D printers are, they're just, it's just so easy to like, you could run them anywhere. As soon as you get into
Hmm.
CNCs, and like I had a snap maker at my old place, which was like an apartment, and I made one single part, and there was like dust, like wood sawdust, like everywhere, and it was so loud. And my wife was just like, "Nope, can't do that anymore." And it was like, yeah,
That's the other
I
thing.
don't, I don't, I don't want to do that. Like my neighbors probably hated me for like the 5 hours that I was cutting a block of wood. So I think that definitely first and foremost is to figure out how to get out of this basement and maybe find a shop that has a big garage door of some sort. And then I can think about machines. And at that point, I'm not even sure what I would get. Like, I don't know if I would get like a Stuff Made Here has definitely sold me on the water jet for metal, because being able to cut metal would change the game for me. I think one thing that I always find cool is like adding a laser cutter change what projects I was able to make down here, which changed what projects I was selecting. And I think that's a very interesting
Right.
thing. And like, I don't even know what would happen if I got something that could cut metal. It would definitely change the game, but I don't know how.
Or something that could print metal, something like that. He
Yeah,
he has a 3D metal printing one also, doesn't he? He
I don't
added
know.
that.
I don't know if he's got a metal printer. He's got a water jet for sure, which is like a 6-axis or a 5-axis water jet. I don't know if
Mhm.
axis exists, but the stuff he can do with that is like pretty amazing already. And then I think he just added a 5-axis CNC, but I don't know if he has metal printing. I think metal printing, I think, is still a little bit of a, I don't want to say anything I don't know enough about it. I don't know enough about it at all.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, it'd be,
Yeah, moving into your own space, even if it's just renting, it's still a huge commitment. It would be a huge shift for your channel, but it would also, be a commitment that would solidify what direction that you're going in. How close do you think you are to making that shift?
I want it to happen within the next year, is what I'll say. I think, I mean, it all ultimately it's just a business thing, right? So if I can prove that I can make enough income to cover the costs, and then obviously like pay myself so I could cover my living costs, that's kind of like what's going to make the go ahead. That's what's going to make it possible. So I kind of just need to make sure that I can guarantee, and it is hard. It's hard as a creator where your income is sort of built off of like how much viewership you have. And I think that I don't know. I don't know if it's like, this is why I haven't done it yet, because it's scary in that commitment, and it's
Right.
scary in
Hmm.
like if you grow too big too fast, like you're going to end up paying the price for it later. Um I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens in the next 6 months to a year, and kind of make decisions based on that. We'll see how my next video does. Long form, it's doing well. Short form, but
I feel like I'm in the same spot. I mean, I feel like I have the same issue, which is I'd like to get a bigger, like a warehouse space, and have like a production line where I can have a staff making the sculptures, the additions, and then I'd have more time to make videos, and then I could focus on making new content, which would be great. But all of that, it would be this huge upfront investment. And what if suddenly my content's not trending, and then all of that investment into being a YouTube creator, what if all of that is, failed? Then the whole art, then the whole business, which is really all I really wanted to do to make the art, then that probably goes down with it, goes down with the ship. So that's why I'm still working out of my home. I'm still have a home based studio. Yeah, so I feel like the situation is kind of similar, but I also feel like the fact that you're able to have the multiple contents, which is the long form and the short form, gives you an advantage, because ultimately I think YouTube kind of cripples the channels of, not YouTube, it's they're not the one crippling it. It's just the dynamic of how the short videos work, which is, someone will watch a 30-second video and they'll hit subscribe almost as though it's the like button, right? And then they don't even know they subscribe to this, but they don't remember them. So these channels have huge subscription bases, and then they try to make a long video, and it doesn't work out because no one wants to watch the video. They don't. No one wants to watch that long video. But you've established yourself with the long video, so you do have an established long video viewership, which I think gives you an excellent footing to really take your channel to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like I'm at that point where I'm actually starting to like more seriously think about it. I've actually like looked at spaces. They weren't the right ones, but I'm at that point where it's, you know, like if the right thing comes up and like I have some certain criteria, which are, it's a very narrow set of criteria. Like I want to be as close to home as possible. Um, and I live in Toronto, which is a very expensive city. So I think, you know, like I am starting to see like just things starting to come together, which is really nice to see. It's been a lot of work to get to this point, but again, it's a little bit of a, it feels like it's not a secure, it never feels like it's secure is I guess the point that I'm making. But
Right,
also all that being said, I mean, if I built a shop where I could build anything, I mean, it's possible
right.
to pivot and find jobs and find like, you can find business with this set of skills. And I think it'd be very similar for you as well. But again, it wouldn't be doing what I set out to do necessarily.
What would you say when you set out to do? What is that? What did you set out to do? And is this, would you consider this to be your dream job, or do you think it's not quite your dream, but it's a good job? How would you?
I think what I set out to do was just like be an artist and make art. But
Hmm.
I think what I've like, I'm very much an entrepreneur as well, and I want to create a successful business. And I think like where I'm sort of starting to find my stride here, I definitely do feel like I've found like a job that I absolutely love. And so yes, I would say this is my dream job. I think making art will be a fun future thing for me to do, but for now, if I can build like a very like a successful brand and business doing exactly what it is that I'm doing, which is like just having fun with engineering and like getting people excited. I think the only thing that's missing for me now is like I want to be able to do this like with other creative people in a space where our all possibilities are possible. And so I'm like on the way to making this like a like the exact vision that I have for my future, which is something like that.
That's super cool. So I really want to thank you for taking the time to chat with me.
No problem. I really appreciate you inviting me onto this podcast. It's been great chatting with you.
Have a great day. Thank you.